Welcome to another DK Custom Products video. I'm Dwayne, this is Kevin, and this here is a 2020 Road Glide. And today we're going to install our Intimidator valves into the forks of this Road Glide.
The Intimidators combined with the next gen shocks, that's a night and day improvement on the bike. Highly recommend it.
So we're going to get into this installation. Again, it's simple installing the product. You just got to get your forks off. So it is helpful to have a manual on hand because there are a lot of differences. This is a standard Road Glide. It would be a different fork fluid level, for example, if you had like the special. So always refer to a manual, but this video should give you a pretty good blanket understanding of how to install Intimidator valves on any model Harley Davidson.
What you want to do first is so you remove your fender so nothing falls on it, scratches your fender up, does any damage, dings, anything like that. The bolts in here on mine, possibly the same on yours, is a 1/4 inch Allen. We're going to remove those first. I'm going to leave the front two with a couple threads attached so the fender doesn't just fall off. And we'll remove the back bolts. And once these 4 bolts are out, you should be able to remove your front fender fairly easily. Be careful doing this not to scratch it up. All right, so the next step you want to do is remove your brake calipers. These have a 12-point 10mm socket. Now what we're going to do here, we're going to use zip ties to zip tie this up to the crash bar just to keep it up out of the way and keep it from having any pressure on the brake line. And that'll keep it up out of the way. I have a dual brake caliper on mine, so we're going to repeat the same process on the other side. So what I like to do here in good practice is to take pictures of where your spacers are, where they're located, the orientation of your axle, and how your speedometer cable or sensor is connected. And that process takes a lot of the guesswork out of the reassembly. Okay, the next step is to remove your axle. This is going to take a 15/16 hex socket. That's what we're going to use on this side to remove the axle. That's not bad. All right, before you tap the axle out, you're going to want to remove this pinch bolt right here, the very bottom of your fork. Now on this model in particular, it's a metric size, whereas these were standard 1/4. This is a metric 9. So this is a method I like to use to remove my axles. I took this nut and turned it around due to the flange on the outside edge. I'm going to we're going to tap it in like that. Back it off just a little bit more. A little bit more tap. Just a little bit more. And tap it again. I'll take and just lightly tap that. You'll get a 3/8 extension, long one preferably, and then now you can take and put it on the end of it and just tap it right through. Now, this is the space we were talking about earlier with your pictures. Be careful not to lose that. Do your best to remember which side it's on or take pictures. So take the guesswork out. So the next step is we're going to remove this chrome cover from the outside of your forks and this plastic cover as well. We're going to remove that bolt, and there's another bolt right here below it. It's exactly the same. That way we can access the pinch bolts that hold the fork tubes on. This is a T40 that's in here. We're going to go ahead and remove those now. All right, obviously they're on both sides, so we're going to repeat the process over here. You can see we're turning the bars, the forks, to make easy access. This is Road Glide. Road Glide's got the stationary fairing. On a Batwing, it may be a little more difficult to access these pinch bolts. If you have difficulty with that, refer to your service manual.
So what we're looking at, just like on the shark nose that we just finished doing, a Batwing bike has the pinch bolts. There's some right here, and then there's some right here behind this. So you would just take this off. We're not going to do it, but you would just take this off, this side and that side, and this comes apart, and then the other pinch bolts are right up in there.
So you also have to remove these 2 small screws that hold your gauge bezel to the plastic cover that's covering your front fork. There we go. There's 2 clips in here that can be disconnected. This is a 2-piece cover. Or you can do what we just did and kind of finesse it out of there. You can do it. See, they're not broken. The clips are still good. The housing's still good. Nothing's broken. We're good. In order to get to the top fork clamps, you're going to have to remove this housing. And to do that, you're going to have to pop this cover off. It pops off from the bottom like that right there with a little flathead screwdriver. And then that just comes right off. And then you're going to want to turn your ignition to the locked position, and it'll just slide right off. Okay, so the next step we're going to do here is we're going to take a marker and we're going to mark where these forks go into these pinch brackets. That way, for reinstallation purposes, you'll know exactly where they go. Okay, and you do this for reinstallation purposes. That way, whenever you put them back in, they're both in the same spot as they were from factory. Now you're going to these pinch bolts, the one up top, the 2 down bottom. You can drop your fork tubes out from there. I'm going to do the top ones first. That way I can be on the bottom side to catch the forks as they come down. Now you can see as soon as those are released, your front fork is going to fall through. Just want to carefully guide that down so your front fork is out. All right, you're going to want to repeat the exact same process on this side.
When this cap gets close to coming out, it's under tension. It's going to spring out. So what we want to do is, when it gets close, is just put our hand around it. There is a special tool. We just don't have it. So there we go. So we have the spacer, and then below the spacer is a washer, and then you have the spring. So what we're doing, we're just letting the fluid drain into here, because we don't need to for the installation, but we're just curious to see how much fluid Harley put into here, because it's supposed to be 3.7 inches from the top. So we have a little piece of cardboard, put it in very slowly until it touches. Look down in there and see when it touches. Right at about just under 4 inches. Plus, we have some stuff on my arm and some stuff on the floor. So it probably was right at about 3.7 inches, which is where Harley said to do it.
Pop this cap back off. There we go.
So we've removed the fork from the bike. We removed the cap from the fork, removed the spring, the spacer, and the washer from it. And now we're going to turn the fork upside down and let it drain out in there, and there's a little trick to get it to, that's some pretty nasty stuff, and you can see there's moisture in it too.
Mm-hmm.
And then what you want to do, you want to cycle it like 10 or 15 times. Because what that is, that's getting all the stuff out of the damper rod now. So you just let that set for like 10 minutes now, and we'll start on the next one. So we have the spacer. And very carefully, we're going to pull out the spring, but just pull it up and let as much of the fluid drain back into the fork. There's the washer. Oh, and you'll notice these are progressive springs. As he pulls them out, you see the coil is looser up top, and as you go down, it gets tighter, and the tighter coil goes on the bottom for when you're putting it back in. And of course, a common question is, should I change the springs when I put in intimidator valves? And the answer is, on most bikes, you won't be able to tell the difference. But if your springs are incredibly weak and you're really bottoming out a lot, then you might want to go ahead and get some aftermarket springs. Or if your weight that you're carrying on the bike is more than the standard amount for the bike, then you might want to also get some springs. But we're just going to put these springs back in. Because you like the ride how it was, and because we added 5/8 with the Intimidator, we went ahead and cut the spacer down by 5/8, right?
Right.
So you can see how the new spacer is 5/8 shorter. But this time what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and dump the fluid into there, because this should be roughly 24 ounces of fluid in here.
Ready?
Yep. You see how milky that is? There's some serious amount of water in there. So we're coming up on the 20 ounce mark. So we're at like the 18. Can you see that right there? We're like at the 18, and we haven't cycled it through. So whether this is the original oil that was in it or someone else changed it, we have no way of knowing. But it does have the correct amount of oil in it. So we're going to go ahead, I'm going to go ahead and dump this in here. We don't need this anymore. So the reason that we did the measurement of how much fluid came out is because you should have a manual. Your manual should tell you how many ounces to put in. It should tell you how to measure it from the top of the fork down to the top of the fluid. But in case you don't have any of that, one of the cheater ways to do it, or shortcuts, which will work most of the time, and that is measure how much came out. Now, if your forks haven't been operating right because maybe the wrong amount of fluid is in it, then you measure what came out and you put that much back in. It was wrong before, it's going to be wrong again. Mm-hmm. So it's really good to have your manual and be able to know how much is to go in there. But it's always interesting to see how much is in there. And if you don't have any other way, you might want to use that as a guideline for how much oil to put back in. So we got everything apart. We got everything drained out. We put the Intimidator in. We may have to, sometimes the Intimidator will need to be pushed down with the spring a little, but it's all the way down on top of the damper rod. Now in the manual it says to put 24 ounces into your fork. Also we measured and we saw that 24 ounces came out. Then in your manual it also says after you put the 24 ounces in, then measure from the top here to where the oil starts, should be 3.7 inches. So we have two ways of knowing that we have the right amount of fluid in there. It's very important that you don't think that you know better than the people who designed the patented Intimidators. Do not use a different fork fluid. This is 10, okay, fork fluid 10, which is what you use for the 49mm Intimidators, which is what you have. Don't use a different one to make it softer or stiffer. It's not going to work with all the different valving going on in here. So we just got to carefully cycle it to get the damper rod full. So the level's going down because the damper rod, which has holes in it, is getting filled up. So we'll just cycle it 10 or 15 times. Okay, I think we got it. So here, let's go ahead and measure and see if we're at 3.7 inches like we were before. That's it.
Right at it.
Right at it.
Right at 3.7.
So then we drop the spring in on top of the Intimidator and put the washer on top of it. We extend this up. All the way. This is the most difficult part. Put the spacer on top of the spring and get the threads started on it.
All right, now that we have our Intimidators in, our new fluid in, everything reassembled on the forks, we're going to put the forks back into the triple tree pinch clamps. But there is a left and right fork, so you want to be sure that you're putting the left on the left and the right on the right. I'm sure your lines will match up the ones you put on at the beginning, which they do. Now we're just going to snug these down. You're going to snug the bottom ones. That way they'll hold in place while you put your top one in. Now you've got your top one snug. We'll rotate to the opposite side, do the same thing on that side. And if your marks have come off, like ours have, they rubbed off with the oil and everything on here, you can see where the clamp was before with the impressions. I'm just marking it. See, I marked it there already where the clamp was at. You'll put it back in there. You want to make sure these lines match up with your clamps. So now that you have your front forks in, you want to torque them down. These bolts here for your fork clamps or pinch clamps call for 18 foot-pounds. All right, now that you have your front forks in and torqued to spec, now you're going to put your gauges, your gauge housing and everything else on the top side here. You want to put it back together. So we turned that to unlock the handlebars earlier. We're going to put that back in the lock position. Put that back down. Okay, now that you've got your gauge housing back over your ignition, then you're going to take your two-piece cover, and like we did last time, we can kind of get it in here. You have to mess with a little bit to get it in here, but see, kind of wiggle a little bit. If you leave it together, you don't want to put too much pressure on those two bolts or those two clips. You should slide right down in there and into position, just like that. Make sure your cables are down out of the way. And then this right here will go back together with 2 small screws that you took out earlier. These are just held in by a T25 Torx. We'll line that back up. These are very easy to strip out. You do not want to put too much on these. Just tight enough to where it will not vibrate loose. Now you put your chrome cover back on, just kind of hold it in place. This one goes in from the bottom side here, just like that. It's got it in place, it shouldn't fall. All right, just to make sure that they do not fall, you can grab a couple of your Torx bolts that you took out earlier. Doing this will make sure nothing falls off, everything's in place. You can kind of look over it one time or 2 times and see that everything's where it needs to be. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and reinstall the wheel. You want to remember your spacers. If you have to refer back to your pictures you took, do so. You do not want to get them mixed up and or forget them. Got that one in. I'm going to, on this side, I have to reinstall my speedometer sensor. Now you can ease your axle right back on through. You may have to give it a little persuasion and tap it in. They bottomed out. That's as far as it goes. Now you'll put your washer. Put your washer on first. Reinstall your nut. Okay, now that you've got your washer and your nut back on, you're going to want to torque it down. These front axles, these axle nuts need to be torqued to 70 to 75 foot-pounds. That's on this bike, but you're going to want to refer to your manual for yours. You're going to want to tighten this bolt back down, reinstall it to 18 foot-pounds. What we're going to end up torquing this to. Now that we've got our wheel and tire and axle reinstalled, now you want to come back up here and you want to cut loose your brake calipers from where you zip tied them up to keep them up out of the way and keep them safe. Earlier, we'll bring these back down. These should slide right back on. Just like that. Once you make sure they're slid on, you want to take some blue Loctite and apply a small amount to the bolts that hold your brake calipers in. Slide it in position. Okay, now we're going to go to the other side. We're going to reinstall that one the exact same way. Now that you've got your bolts for your brake calipers reinstalled, you want to torque them down to 26 to 38 foot-pounds. We're going to go in between, and we're going to go with 34. Repeat the same process on this opposite side. The final piece of the puzzle is to reinstall your fender. Again, be careful putting this on here. You don't want to ding it up, scratch it, anything like that. This one's dirty, filthy, I ride. So, all right, and same thing here. You're gonna install your bolt. If you can get it with your hands, kind of get it finger tight. And I'll hold it in place. I'm gonna go ahead and do the rear one here. And make sure not to cross thread them. Now that we've got these in and finger tight, you want to go ahead and cinch them down. Repeat the process on the other side. And just like that, you have your intimidators installed. Okay, so I just got back from my initial test drive with the Intimidators installed. I'm so used to riding the way it was that I didn't know what was going to happen. When I hit a bump, I took it across some really bad ones, across some bridges, and it's a night and day difference, honestly. The front tire, it seemed more in touch with the road. It didn't seem like it lost contact at any point. And so what's weird about that is you see the bump coming, and you'll expect just a hard slam, right? And it didn't slam at all. It seemed like it just kind of almost glided straight over it. And the Intimidators combined with the next gen shocks, that's a night and day improvement on the bike. Highly recommend it.
But if you have any questions at all, leave us a comment below or shoot me an email to support@dkcustomproducts.com, or hey, give us a call, 662-252-8828. We have an entire customer service team ready to help you out.
Y'all ride safe out there.